If leadership were merely about providing answers, then the most knowledgeable person in the room would always be the best leader. But we know this is not the case. We have all seen it. Individuals bursting with expertise who nonetheless fail to inspire, to engage, to transform the people around them. Leadership is not the art of knowing more. It is the art of awakening more thinking, more insight, more ownership, more courage in others. And there is no more powerful tool for awakening than the artful asking of questions. Questions, when used consciously, do something that no speech, no directive, no strategy document can achieve. They open minds. They shift attention from passive reception to active exploration. They invite people to step into the conversation not merely as listeners, but as creators of meaning. A well-crafted question is not a request for information. It is an invitation to think differently, to feel differently, to see differently. It creates a space where new possibilities can emerge, possibilities that would have remained dormant, hidden beneath the surface of unconscious assumptions. Great leaders understand this. They resist the seductive urge to always provide immediate answers. Instead, they hold space for discovery. They recognize that the best solutions are often not the ones handed down from above, but the ones co-created through dialogue, reflection, and courageous inquiry. Asking powerful questions is not a sign of weakness, nor is it a tactic of indecision. It is a deliberate, conscious act of leadership. It says to your team, I trust your intelligence. I believe in your capacity to find insights that matter. I am willing to be surprised, willing to learn, willing to evolve with you. And make no mistake, the questions you choose to ask shape the emotional and intellectual climate of your team. Questions can open hearts or close them. They can awaken curiosity or trigger defensiveness. They can deepen trust or sow seeds of suspicion. The difference lies not just in the words themselves, but in the spirit behind them. Are you asking to dominate, to test, to control? Or are you asking to explore, to connect, to unleash? The quality of your leadership ultimately will be reflected in the quality of your questions. Because questions are not just tools for gathering information. They are instruments for building relationships, fostering growth, and cultivating a living, breathing culture of inquiry, courage, and innovation. In this lesson, we will explore the psychology behind powerful questions, the types of questions that drive real leadership impact, the common mistakes to avoid, and the practices that can elevate your conversations from transactional exchanges to transformational encounters. Because in the end, it is not the answers you know that will define you as a leader. It is the questions you dare to ask. To truly appreciate the art of asking questions as a leader, we must first understand the deeper psychological forces that questions unleash within the human mind and heart. Because questions are not neutral tools. They are catalysts. They are engines of transformation. When you ask a question, you do not simply request information. You awaken curiosity. You activate the seeking mechanisms of the brain, mechanisms that are hardwired into our very biology. The human mind is designed to search for answers once a question is planted, much like a seed that compels the earth to respond with new life. Questions disrupt automatic thinking. They break through the mental autopilot that governs so much of daily behavior. Where answers often confirm what we already know, good questions open a doorway to what we do not yet see. They invite reflection. They destabilize old assumptions just enough to make space for new understanding. But the power of questions goes beyond cognition. They also have a profound emotional effect. When someone asks you a sincere, open, non-judgmental question, it signals something rare and precious. You matter. Your perspective is valued. Your experience is worth exploring. This emotional signal builds trust. It lowers defensiveness. It creates a relational field where vulnerability, creativity, and real collaboration become possible. And here is a beautiful paradox. When you tell people what to do, they may comply temporarily. When you help people discover the path themselves through powerful questioning, they own it. They commit not because they have been forced, but because they have seen with their own eyes and felt with their own hearts. Questions, then, bypass resistance in a way that commands never can. They engage the autonomy of the individual, the inner sense of agency and dignity that every human being fiercely protects. A leader who asks great questions is not less powerful than a leader who commands. They are more powerful because their influence operates not through pressure, but through awakening. And perhaps most importantly, Questions nurture intrinsic motivation. They allow people to connect their own values, their own desires, their own creativity to the work they are doing. They turn external obligations into internal commitments. In a world flooded with noise, directives, and shallow demands for attention, the leader who knows how to plant a real question into the mind of another becomes something rare. Not just a manager of work, but a cultivator of growth, a guide of discovery, a midwife of transformation. To ask a true question, one that opens rather than closes, one that invites rather than traps, is to touch something deep and eternal in the human spirit. The longing to understand, to connect, to create meaning. This is the quiet, hidden power that lives inside every question you dare to ask. Not all questions are created equal. The form of question shapes the journey it invites. And as leaders, we must become exquisitely sensitive to the different types of questions we can ask, and to the different kinds of worlds they open or close. Let us begin with closed questions. These are questions that can be answered with a simple yes or no, or with a short factual response. Did you complete the project? Is the client satisfied? Can you finish this by Friday? Closed questions are efficient. They are useful when quick decisions or confirmations are needed. They help when clarity must be achieved on logistical or factual matters. But closed questions also close the door to deeper exploration. They do not invite reflection. They do not invite ownership. They often reduce conversation to transaction. When a leader leans too heavily on closed questions, they reduce dialogue to checklist management. And people feel it. They feel their thinking is not being invited. They feel their emotions are irrelevant. They begin to shrink their contributions to match the narrowness of the questions asked. Now consider open-ended questions. These are questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. They invite stories. They invite complexity. They invite new possibilities to emerge. What opportunities do you see in this situation? How do you feel about the direction we're taking? What would success look like from your perspective? Open-ended questions expand the space of the conversation. They create room for exploration. They give people permission to bring their full intelligence, creativity, and emotional truth into the dialogue. Open-ended questions shift the dynamic from control to collaboration, from hierarchy to partnership. They tell your team, without needing to say it explicitly, I believe you have something valuable to contribute beyond the obvious. And then we come to reflective questions, perhaps the most transformative of all. Reflective questions are not merely about gathering information or generating options. They are about surfacing what lies beneath the surface: emotions, values, deeper motivations. What feels most important to you about this challenge? Where do you feel most energized, and where do you feel stuck? What does success mean to you beyond the numbers? Reflective questions invite people not just to think, but to feel, to connect with their own deeper currents. They make the invisible visible. They help people articulate the inner landscape that often drives outer behavior without awareness. As a leader, when you move skillfully between these types of questions, using closed questions to clarify logistics, open-ended questions to explore possibilities, and reflective questions to uncover meaning, you orchestrate conversations that are not mechanical exchanges, but living, breathing processes of insight and growth. And perhaps most importantly, you remind those you lead that leadership is not just about efficiency. It is about humanity. It is about honoring the full richness of the human mind, the full depth of the human heart. Questions are not tools for extraction. They are invitations to discovery. And the kind of questions you ask tells the world and your team what kind of leader you truly are. If questions have the power to open minds, to build trust, to unlock hidden potential, then surely, as leaders, we must approach the crafting of our questions with reverence, with intentionality, almost with artistry. Crafting transformational questions is not a mechanical task. It is not about pulling a few clever phrases from a manual. It is an act of deep presence, of genuine curiosity, of humble service to the unfolding of something greater than yourself. The first and most essential principle is this: start from genuine curiosity, not hidden agendas. If you ask questions simply to steer people toward an answer you have already decided, you are not leading through dialogue, you are manipulating through disguise. People sense this. They feel when a question is an invitation and when it is a trap. A truly transformational question is born from a place of real wondering. I do not fully understand yet. I am willing to be surprised. I am open to insights beyond my own thinking. This posture of curiosity is not weakness. It is the strength of a leader secure enough to be changed by the conversation they initiate. The second principle is to focus on what and how questions, rather than immediately defaulting to why. Why questions, while sometimes necessary, often trigger defensiveness. They sound like challenges. Why did you do that? Why isn't this done yet? They drive people into justification mode rather than exploration mode. In contrast, what and how open doors. What are you noticing about the situation? How could we approach this differently? They keep the conversation forward-facing. They invite creativity instead of self-defense. The third principle is to frame your questions to empower, not to trap. A transformational question does not corner someone into a narrow binary. It opens new possibilities. It invites agency. Instead of asking, "Don't you think we should just follow the plan?" Ask, "What alternatives might strengthen our current plan even further?" Instead of asking, "Isn't this your fault?" Ask, "What have we learned from this, and how can we integrate that learning into our next steps?" The spirit of the question matters even more than its syntax. A question framed with judgment or urgency will close hearts. A question framed with openness and trust will unlock unseen potential. And remember, a transformational question is not necessarily complex or sophisticated. Some of the most powerful questions are the simplest. What matters most right now? What does your intuition say? What would courage do in this situation? Simple, clear, alive. Crafting questions is leadership at its most subtle and powerful. It requires humility to ask, patience to listen, courage to remain in the unknown for a little longer, to resist the premature closure of certainty. Because every question you ask, consciously or unconsciously, plants a seed. And the seeds you plant today will shape the conversations, the decisions, the culture, and ultimately the future you lead tomorrow. So ask, not to control, not to perform, but to invite, to awaken, to co-create. Even with the best intentions, it is easy for leaders to misuse the power of questions, to fall into subtle traps that erode trust rather than building it, that close minds rather than opening them. And if we are to lead through dialogue, we must become acutely aware of these mistakes so that we may navigate around them with grace and wisdom. The first common mistake is asking rhetorical or manipulative questions. These are not true questions at all. They are disguised statements designed not to explore but to persuade, to corner, to coerce agreement. Consider a question like, "Don't you agree that this is obviously the best course of action?" Or, "Isn't it clear that your method is wrong?" Such questions insult the intelligence and autonomy of those we lead. They signal that the leader is not genuinely interested in another perspective, but merely seeking validation of their own. When you ask a rhetorical question, you create the illusion of dialogue while in truth reinforcing hierarchy and control. And over time, people will stop bringing their real thoughts and emotions to you. They will learn to say what you want to hear, and you will lead a team that complies outwardly but disengages inwardly. The second common mistake is firing questions too rapidly, without space for real reflection. In the rush of meetings, in the urgency of problem solving, it is tempting to bombard people with questions. What's the issue? What's your plan? How fast can you deliver? But deep questions require space. They require breathing room. They require silence, that most uncomfortable and powerful of leadership tools in which real thinking can occur. When you stack questions on top of each other, you overwhelm. You create a climate where quick, shallow answers replace deep, considered insights. You may get compliance, but you lose wisdom. True leadership dialogue means asking a question and then waiting, allowing the space for something real to emerge, trusting that silence is not a failure, but a sign that thoughtfulness is taking root. The third common mistake is asking surface questions and ignoring emotional depth. It is easy to ask about tasks, about deadlines, about deliverables. It is harder and braver to ask about emotions, about meaning, about human reality. What's the status of the project? Is a safe question. But how are you feeling about the challenges you're facing? That requires vulnerability, both from the asker and the listener. When leaders remain only at the surface, they create teams that function mechanically but struggle emotionally. They miss the early signs of burnout, of disengagement, of brewing conflict. It is only by daring to ask beneath the surface. What's weighing on you right now? What's giving you energy? Where do you feel unseen or unsupported? that we uncover the true landscape we are leading. And remember, it is not about prying or forcing. It is about inviting gently, respectfully, with deep attunement to what the other is ready to share. Avoiding these mistakes, rhetorical questions, rapid fire interrogations, surface only inquiries, is not about mastering a technique. It is about embodying a mindset. A mindset of genuine respect, of courageous curiosity, of human centered leadership. Because every question you ask is not just a tool, it is a mirror. It reveals who you are as a leader and how much you truly trust the humanity of those you lead. When we gather people together under the banner of a shared mission, whether in a small team or an entire organization, we are not merely managing bodies or coordinating tasks. We are gathering minds, experiences, imaginations, hearts. And hidden within this collective is a vast intelligence far greater than the sum of its individual parts. It is an intelligence that cannot be commanded into existence. It must be invited. It must be drawn out. And the key to unlocking it is not a stronger assertion of authority, nor a louder declaration of vision. It is the gentle, courageous art of asking the right questions. Leadership through questioning is an act of faith. Faith that those you lead carry wisdom you do not yet see, that the best answers are not always already known, that creativity, resilience, and insight can be summoned from within the group itself if only the right doors are opened. When a leader asks real questions, questions that invite exploration rather than dictate direction, they send a message more powerful than any motivational speech. You are not here merely to execute my ideas. You are here because your mind, your perspective, your unique voice matters. Through questioning, we create ownership. Solutions that are handed down from above may be obeyed. Solutions that are discovered through dialogue are embraced. Ownership grows not when people are told what to do, but when they are asked what they see, what they believe, what they would build if given the chance. This is why the best leaders do not rush to answer every question themselves. They resist the temptation to be the smartest person in the room. Instead, they become the steward of the room's collective wisdom. They create spaces where exploration is honored, where mistakes are seen not as failures, but as the price of genuine discovery, where diverse perspectives are not managed away but welcomed as vital ingredients of innovation. To unlock collective intelligence through questions, a leader must slow down the conversation just enough for depth to emerge. They must ask questions that are spacious, questions that allow for reflection, for disagreement, for the unexpected to surface. They must create a psychological environment where people feel safe not only to speak their thoughts, but to revise them, to challenge each other respectfully, to co-create something larger than any one mind could conceive alone. Leadership through questioning transforms the very culture of a team. It builds a culture where curiosity triumphs over cynicism, where learning is more valued than pretending to know, where dialogue is not a risk but a norm. And in such cultures, extraordinary things happen. Problems are solved not just quickly but wisely, creativity flourishes at all levels, and the team becomes resilient in the face of uncertainty because they have learned not just to execute, but to think together. When you ask questions as a leader, you are not giving away power. You are multiplying it. You are turning leadership from a solo act into a symphony. You are moving from managing others to liberating them. And in liberating them, you liberate yourself from the exhausting, unsustainable burden of having to know everything, control everything, solve everything alone. To lead by questioning is to lead by trust. And trust, once woven into the fabric of a team, becomes the most powerful force you will ever have at your disposal. As we reach the end of this exploration, I invite you to step back for a moment and truly feel the depth of what we have uncovered together. Leadership is often imagined as a posture of strength, of certainty, of knowing, but if we look more closely, if we look more honestly, we find that the greatest leaders are not those who know the most. They are those who awaken the most. And the instrument they wield, with patience and wisdom, is not merely the answer, it is the question. Questions are not interruptions in the flow of leadership. They are the flow itself. Every powerful question you ask invites movement where there was stagnation. It invites reflection where there was reaction. It invites ownership where there was obedience. It invites courage where there was compliance. When you lead through questions, you're not controlling people. You are opening them, opening their minds to possibilities they had not considered, opening their hearts to care more deeply than they thought possible, opening their spirits to engage not out of obligation, but out of genuine commitment. And this, perhaps, is the hidden miracle of leadership through questioning. It transforms leadership from a one-way transmission of authority into a living, breathing dance of co-creation. It says to those you lead, "You are not here to simply execute my ideas. You are here to build something with me, something none of us could create alone." In every conversation, in every moment of uncertainty, in every meeting where stakes feel high, remember this. You do not have to have all the answers. You have to have better, braver, deeper questions. Ask questions that invite reflection rather than reaction. Ask questions that invite curiosity rather than judgment. Ask questions that invite agency rather than dependence. When you master the art of questioning, you unlock not just the intelligence of your team, but the very soul of your leadership. You move from being a commander of tasks to a cultivator of possibilities. You stop pushing people and start pulling forth their best. And in doing so, you step into a leadership that is not only more effective, but more human, more courageous, more profoundly alive. The future of leadership belongs not to those who know the most, but to those who dare to ask the most powerful questions. Be one of them.